Thanks, Ian. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, you've all been hearing me for the last 15 minutes, so it's all good. the whole kit and caboodle.
Yep, it's on.
Am I going? Okay, so I'm Lana, and I'm going to start with a big disclaimer that I'm not a teacher, I am a parent. I'm also a technical writer for SUSE, so you will be able to find me over at the Docs Miniconf for the rest of the day. But yeah, this is honestly just our research and our experiences of what we've seen.
Hi, I'm Tahlia. I'm in Year 10 and I'm in the Australian public school system, and I've just had experiences.
Also, just for reference, this isn't a very Australian-focused thing, but a lot of the stuff we're going through is very similar for New Zealand as well. I haven't picked those dates out specifically. And also, we're Queenslanders, so there's probably a little bit of a Brisbane bias going on there too. So many years ago, my nephew was about 6. Admittedly, he's about 18 now. And he just started school, and he asked his mum, who was my sister-in-law, who invented school. And my sister-in-law, his mum, in her infinite wisdom, went, "Auntie Lana's smart. She'll know." So I got a phone call. And of course, the challenge is set at that point, and no auntie wants to be seen lacking. So I set about finding an answer for him. School as we know it really has existed since the Victorian era. In 1870, there was a law passed in England which made school mandatory for children between the ages of 5 and 10. And the leaving age actually got increased to 11 in 1893. So Victorian ideas of educating children was, of course, imported to Australia with the white settlers, and New Zealand as well, no doubt. And that happened around the late 18th century. And so then they had what they called ragged schools, which was set up mostly by churches with a little bit of government money and some donations from wealthy participants. And children just sort of went along, and it was all a bit half-assed, really. So the children of the wealthy got sent to boarding schools in England, but Australia actually got its own grammar schools, modelled on the English style, in the mid-1800s. So Launceston Grammar School was in 1846, and Melbourne Grammar School was in 1858. They're widely considered the first of their type. Of course, we all know about the strict discipline of Victorian-era schools. That's what we hear about the most. So there's caning and dunce hats and all that kind of thing that's thankfully gone out of fashion. We also know this era of schooling for its endless rote learning methods. Children were forced to copy down incredible amounts of content from a blackboard, and they were reciting lines and that kind of thing. Ad nauseum is the word I've used in my notes.
Of course, school has changed, but the methods of learning still widely haven't. And although instead of learning off a blackboard, we're now learning off a whiteboard. One of the most notable times that this has happened to me, it was last year in my math class. The teacher would write up the formula and made us recite the formula and write it down. Then he would write out the problem, answer it without even letting us look at the problems first or having a chance to try and answer them ourselves. So once he's written it down, he would rub it off again and then start listing up textbook questions, which meant that we never really learnt how to solve it. But I decided to ask questions, and he just told me that I wasn't listening. So it made it incredibly difficult for that school year, and because sadly I don't have a photographic memory.
The main method of training teachers remained the same for many years. Particularly bright students were generally asked to remain at school, and they essentially got an apprenticeship learning alongside their own teachers. They were called student teachers. So in Australia, there was also a tendency to import teachers from England, which is about as expensive as you can imagine. In Brisbane, it began to change when a teacher training college was opened in 1914. And so the student teacher system eventually sort of phased out, but it wasn't phased out completely till the mid-30s. Around 1905, there was some significant syllabus changes, which moved the focus away from subjects that would sharpen mental faculties such as memory and reasoning, and towards more vocational subjects, things like agriculture and what they used to call domestic economy. They also saw more of a shift towards learning by doing, at least in theory.
My history class last year also had its flaws, as one assignment we did was a research assignment. For the assignment, I thought it was really fun because we got to choose a historical figure. I chose Gloria Steinem and her work in the feminist movement. This was a really fun assignment at the start, but then we got to the bookwork. And we had a research book and we were told exactly how to lay it out, basically word for word. I had a friend who switched around two little things and was told to restart the book again. Then, when we were writing the essay, he gave us a really badly written exemplar and basically told us to change the dates and the historical things to make it our own. And all I really learnt in that was how to copy someone else's work.
The Depression and the two world wars had a significant impact on education around the world, but in Australia as well. It impacted children's ability to attend school, it impacted the ability to hire and pay teachers, and also the ability to get education resources. In Australia, unemployment peaked at 32% in 1932, and national income dropped by a third. It actually took almost a decade before the economy started to recover after the Depression. In 1932, 60,000 Australians were on what they called the SUSO. It was a state-based sustenance package. It was something like unemployment benefits now. And in my research, I came along this glorious poem.
We're on the SUSO now, we can't afford a cow, we live in a tent, we pay no rent, we're on the SUSO now.
Isn't that glorious? As a result of the economic situation, funding to schools was severely restricted and teachers' pays were cut dramatically. To add insult to injury, the Married Women's Act came into force in the 30s as well, which forced women to quit their jobs when they got married. Even unmarried women were subject to annual review of their position, and I can only assume that that's so that they weren't sneaking off and getting pregnant. So during the 40s, in the midst of the Second World War, teachers in Australia started to get better training and recognition with the introduction of the Teacher's Certificate. After the war ended, with economic prosperity all starting to come through and starting to return, we had a number of reforms, mostly in the way schooling was managed by the government and the various oversight bodies amongst the states. This helped to improve regulation across Australia, and schooling, especially secondary school, became more uniform across each state. The school leaving age was extended, fees and entrance exams for high school were abolished, and that made it easier for children to move between different schools, at least within their own state. Perhaps most importantly though, secondary school was reframed in the public's mind as something that was desirable for their children, especially for their boys, of course. In terms of helping them get jobs later on and getting skills that were useful to them as adults. So for many Australian students though, the most important reform of this era was the free milk program. Some of you may remember that. And if you grew up in one of the hotter states, then you will remember exactly how terrible that milk was after it had been sitting on the bag racks since morning, ready for little lunch.
Today, gender is not quite as big of a deal in the classroom as it was, but people's attitude is still a big player in the subjects that teenagers are choosing. In my school, there's about 30 students in each class, and last year I did woodwork and home economics. One of the big things I noticed was the gender divide, and after talking to other people in my classes, it seemed it was there too. So in my woodwork class, there were 3 girls, including myself. In my home ec class, there were 4 boys. In the mechatronics class, there was 2 girls. And in the digital technologies class, there was 5 girls. This amazed me, and it got me thinking about what people are doing to influence, what people are influencing their teenagers to do. And when my friend told her parents that she wanted to do Certificate 1 in manufacturing this year, her parents tried to talk her out of it. After the class list came out for this year, she found out that there was only 2 girls in the whole program in the grade, which is about 300 students. So although there is quite a big gender divide in classrooms, luckily we are all being told to graduate and we're all being helped to graduate, and teachers are showing us that no matter what you're interested in, there is a way to go past year 12 and be able to do that for your career. So we're all being encouraged to graduate, which is good.
By the time the 60s and 70s rolled around, attitudes to children and discipline were relaxing, and while some more progressive schooling styles had been around for a really long time by then, the rise of Montessori and Steiner schools, with their focus on learning through play and reward rather than strict discipline, was starting to become more popular. While some of the more radical ideas have fallen out of favour again these days, the general approach of that period remains. Schools and teachers focus on improving children to become productive members of society. This leads to observations of schools being designed now to produce office drones, sitting at a desk day in, day out, doing exactly what is required within specific parameters and never questioning authority. And with that, it seems we've almost come full circle. Victorian children were asked to sit at their desks, write lines and recite facts. Today, they sit at their laptops and do essentially the same thing. Fewer beatings, hopefully less public shaming. Over the years, the subjects have changed a little around the edges. Children learn coding now instead of knitting socks for soldiers. And they have traded slates for laptops. But the fundamentals have really not changed at all. My little nephew was perhaps more insightful than he might have realised. He didn't ask, when did people start going to school? He asked, when was school invented? Imagine for a moment that school was invented. A single human being came up with an idea of how young people could be taught all the things they need to know as an adult. If you were the person doing that, how would you do it? Thank you very much.
Oh, yes.
Of course you can. I have a handheld.
We'll grab a handheld. Does anyone have any questions?
One of the things that you talked about was one of the things that you talked about was graduate. What does it mean to graduate within the Australian system?
Well, for graduating, we have the option to leave at year 10 with just a school certificate, but we also have the chance to leave at year 12, and that is doing our ATAR tests, end of year 12 tests, and we're all being encouraged to go all the way to year 12 and do the ATAR, and it's just our school really, like, it pushes everyone towards that, at least for us. Okay, I'll just echo it.
Just to clarify, that's you can't leave in the states of Australia, so in New South Wales and ACT, it's mandatory for each student now, so you can't leave school.
So just for the recording, ACT in New South Wales, you can leave at year 11, and Victoria's you have to go till year 12? Okay. Okay, wow. Yeah, in Queensland it's year 10, if you turn 17 or you get employment or something like that. Yes?
Curious, it seemed like your school structured electives and where electives go and then you chose to follow the school. What was your experience being outnumbered in the classroom and supporting the teacher? Is that something that you did?
So about how the split, I think it did feel that it was just in the classroom, the feel was very different, and it was just kind of all the girls in my woodwork class were all just kind of pushed off to the side, and it did feel that way. And like you would try to ask a question and get something across, and it always felt like we were cut down a bit more. I think the same in home ec. Of course, I was of the majority when I was doing home economics, but it was the same sort of thing. Like all the boys sat at one table, and mostly it was just you're over there. So I wish that it was a different, if it was set up differently, and I wish that more people were encouraged, but it just sadly not. And but I am, I don't know. I think I probably would do it again because it was still an interesting subject. Yes. Yes, go for it. Up the back. So it was a question about paper or technology. Well, personally, I do like using our laptops, although a lot of my teachers have decided to tell us that we're not allowed to use our laptops at all in their class. And then people stop taking their laptops to that specific class, and then the teachers are yelling at us about why we don't have our laptops in that class. And have sometimes even just gotten us to put them out on our desk to show that we have them but never used them. It's very useless. It just feels like a paperweight. Yes? No, our laptops are not issued by the school. We have a bring your own program, which does make it difficult. And there's been a lot of people who haven't been able to get laptops, and teachers basically just go, well, what are you going to do now? They don't really give us a second option, and they don't, like we used to have rental laptops, and that used to be the main system, but then they just phased it out and told everyone to start paying for their own laptops, and then never really gave anyone who couldn't afford it much of a choice.
I do believe there's actually a finance program, but it's not advertised in the material that they send to parents. It's more like, if you have financial difficulties, please contact this number. And you have no idea what you might get when you call that number. And personally, I haven't had to, so I'm not sure of what assistance is available. I do believe there is some assistance available. I'm just not sure exactly what. Sorry, there was a question down here first. I suspect it's like with other programs, like, if you can't afford an excursion or something like that, it's more just a payment plan. It's not necessarily here's an option where it costs you less or nothing. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. This is just a personal experience that I feel was a bit similar. So I'm still in high school, but a few years back I did F1 in schools, sewing and wood tech. In the wood tech class there were only 2 girls. In F1 in schools there were only 3. We all sort of banded together through the necessity for having another girl next to you. Literally the only reason. We had nothing in common. There was nothing that we could talk about other than the class and how we felt like, especially in the wood tech, there was an older male teacher and he called me MZ Lou, and
I have had...
I'm her father, I'm not allowed to know.
I I have had a very similar experience in my woodwork class. There was only a few of us, and we did band together. And whenever there was groups, we were left out. I had to partner up for a design thing, and there was an odd number of people, and the other girls were away that day, and I was left out, and I had to awkwardly go join two other people who kind of forgot that I was there the whole time. So it was very frustrating, and at one point I asked for a chisel or something or someone else. They just refused to give it to me. Which I found very strange. I found it very strange, and I just apparently wasn't allowed to use it.
You didn't have enough questions? Okay, sorry.
Because I'm a maths teacher, so I'd love to hear from you. How would you have liked that lesson to run that you felt you would have maybe learned and understand?
The way I specifically like my math lessons to be run is that, we go through the formula. Like, the first part of that lesson was really good. Like, we went through the formula, we wrote it down, and we learned kind of how to set things up. But he never explained the formula. So, going step by step through the formula, and then as you're going through it on the board, going and step by step, showing people, and then showing a bit of extra working, and so that people can copy that down, and not just rushing through it, and then getting them go by step. And I think that helps me personally, but I like it when things are explained more thoroughly.
Tahlia's maths teacher last year was not a maths teacher, he was an IT teacher. And there were other parents who had complaints about his teaching style. I was one of at least half a dozen that we know of, and concluding with, some very stern words, head of department, all that kind of thing. I do believe what was going on was he didn't actually know the material. So it is teaching style, yes, but that teaching style was because of the fact that he didn't really know what he was teaching. He had a habit of putting YouTube videos on and that kind of thing, rather than teaching. Yeah.
Yep.
So alternatively, I'm in year 10. I have a different experience.
Oh, good. What school do you go to?
Do you want me to? I'll run the mic up.
So I'm going into year 10 this year, but last year in year 9, I got to choose 3 electives. I chose graphics, woodwork, and engineering, which are all 3 of the available tech subjects, pretty much. And previously to that, I've been in, because of mandatory things, I've done all of the home ec stuff as well. But for year 9, I noticed a weird. I was expecting a lot of what you had, but what I found was a lot of my mates, guys, were doing a lot of not the sewing, but the food tech. So the food tech classrooms were majority males, if not 50-50. And for the tech subjects, my engineering class consisted of 5 girls, but I know of the other engineering class which had closer to 10 to 15. So yeah, that's just I found different experience with a much evener divide.
Do you think something's to do with the name? Home ec versus food tech?
I don't know, because, for us, home ec is the combination of, it's more of a blanket statement, which means food tech and sewing, but they are both separate subjects, so...
But, Tahlia, I believe it was actually called home ec, right?
It was called home ec, but it was the combination of the two, and it stays as the combination of the two at least until year 11. So we don't actually ever split it. It's always half year, half a year.
Yeah, I just wonder if the focus on food technology is more like you can grow up to be a great chef, whereas home ec is you can grow up to be a great wife.
Yeah. Here, admittedly, the school that Chevelle goes to is a slightly different style, as she's a junior high, but all of those creative subjects are something tech. It's food tech, it's science tech, compute tech. And so maybe they're, as you suggest, maybe they're actually trying to level that out and focus more on the fact these are creative skills to be learned rather than...
Maybe we should start calling woodwork like, home arts or something.
Yeah. It's a skill that's useful in a creative way rather than... The traditional was, this is going to get you a job or this is going to help you better at home.
Yeah.
I have to say with my business class, I was really happy with the split in that. It was almost 50-50, and then there was, I think, 5 business classes and they were all pretty much the same, which I was really happy about. And going into this year, the class lists, they're all pretty much 50-50 in most of the business subjects, which is what I'm doing. And the drama classes are all pretty evenly split as well. Any other questions?
Ian says we haven't. Keep going.
When you had either a very small amount of girls or a very small amount of boys in class, how did either you and your friends in the majority or the minority try to mingle with the other part? Did you try that?
Well, with mingling... Oh, yeah. So the question was, like, in the minority or majority, did you try to mingle more with the other half, or the other group? Minority. So with that, in my woodwork class, it wasn't ever really... We didn't really get a chance to mingle, and no one did. They stayed very much within their little group of friends, and I tried to reach out more to the other girls, at least, because I saw that most of them were alone and I had a friend. And there was a few people from my homeroom class that we did know, and so there was a mix of us, and we were more of the mixed group, but we were like the only one that were. So anyone who was kind of strangling on would come join our group. And I think that did help a bit, but it wasn't enough. And in my home economics class, it was very much just the boys sat at that one table at the back and they never tried to do much. But I also don't know whether they were told to do it by their parents or they chose to do it by themselves. And because some of them looked incredibly bored and like they didn't want to be there. So,
That's a school, yeah.
So there could also be a little bit that their parents asked them to do that, because I know that a lot of my friends have had that experience. Yes.
Just wondering if anyone has experienced.
Run, Tahlia. I like this. She's room monitor and speaker.
I'm just wondering if anyone has experienced a school which tries to, based on historical records of the gender balances between different courses, combine courses that are primarily chosen by one or the other gender into a single semester. Like, for example, you could have home economics, which is sewing plus soldering, or something like that. Or you could have cooking and disassembling a mixing machine or something like that. Because as a cub lead. So I'm just wondering if they could be combined into a single term and you could get both groups together.
That does remind me of another thing that happened in my woodwork class. With the soldering, we did learn how to do it, and there wasn't that many people who knew how to do it in the class, but there was me and I think 2 other boys who actually knew how to do it. And so we would tasked with teaching a lot of other people how to use soldering irons, and no one believed me.
You should have just gone, but I've been to LCA for years.
They didn't know what that was. Yeah.
Something that's a little bit of a broader question, maybe Lana, you might be in a better position to answer. Would you suggest, from a parental point of view, the way that this system is working, particularly we were talking about teenagers from the sort of 10, 11, 12-year-old, would you suggest that this is actually having an effect on their own social development and awareness? Because this is a time when they are becoming very, very aware of who they are and who they are going to be within themselves. And this sort of trying to keep, or this way that it seems to be naturally keeping kids in these little boxes. You're a girl, you do this. You're a boy, you do that. Would you as a parent speculate that perhaps that's actually having a detrimental effect on their own personal development?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think there's any question about that, really. There's the larger societal stuff, right? I mean, we gender kids even before they're born. Are you having a little boy, you're having a little girl, you buy blue clothes, you buy pink clothes, you buy a truck or a Barbie or a soft toy or whatever. So kids are gendered right from the very beginning, and it doesn't matter how much you fight against that. Society is always going to do that until we have much, much broader changes, which may or may not happen. I don't know, climate change will get us before that, I think. But, of course, kids are impressionable. And, I mean, especially in primary school, they're coming home every day and going, oh, I wanted to go and play soccer, but the boys said I couldn't play with them. Or I wanted to go and play with the Barbie dolls, but the girls said that I wasn't allowed. And so that stuff happens, and it happens for 13 years. And as a parent, you... having a young woman who is about to turn 15 in my house has made me realise over the last 5 or 10 years, you gradually cede control. I used to be able to tell her what to eat for dinner. I can't do that anymore. I used to be able to tell her what clothes she could wear. I can't do that anymore. The school rules have more impact on her than my rules quite a lot of the time. She'd love to have her hair coloured like mine, but she can't because the school rules say she can't. So, yeah, obviously, you control seeds as a parent over time, and you have to give them over to society, in a sense.
I just wanted to ask regarding the status quo versus what could be, and questioning some of the underlying assumptions of the education model that we have now. I saw an example of an education model which I found really intriguing being done in the US by an entire public school system, so it's just a state-run school system, but with a fellow called Charlie Reisinger who was in charge of IT for this entire school system, so 5,000 students, 600 teachers, I think 12 or 13 different schools. And they basically created a fully Linux-based one-to-one laptop program for the high school, and the high school support for that laptops, and the laptops were built each year so that each student received one as part of their their families didn't have to provide one. So each student received one, and they were all built and maintained, and there were how-to sessions and so on, all run by students that were part of a self-selected kind of crack IT squad, and it was really prestigious to be part of that in the school, and there was quite a good gender balance in that, but the students all received trust. They actually were given root access to their machines. They could install whatever they wanted to. Peer pressure was used instead of authority. And so if a student screwed up their computer and they couldn't do an assignment, they could take it to their peer, who was the IT support person, and they had to explain what had happened. So it gave them a certain governor to their behavior. But the crazy thing was that they also taught the teachers how to use the software.
Yeah.
The teachers just told them what they had to achieve, and the students could choose what software to use to do it. And then they taught each other. And so the teachers learned from the students, and the students actually provided IT support for the entire administration of the school system. All the primary schools got their IT support from this group of students. These students became kind of very well respected, and in other school systems, they would have been, in some cases, outcasts, perhaps.
They would have been the nerds playing D&D in the library.
But they were the ones who
magic.
actually helped, that everybody realized that they were the ones who made it all run. And it's called The Open Schoolhouse. Charlie's written a book about it. It's called theopenschoolhouse.com. If anybody wants it, I have a Creative Commons licensed version of the book. He's taken it off his site, I think, because his book sales weren't so good. But I have a Creative Commons licensed version of the manuscript if anyone wants to see it.
Sounds to me like it might just keep me up at night. If I was telling the story of Tahlia's schooling, as from my perspective, rather we did it from her perspective, obviously, it would be about trust. That would be the central theme. We chose her school primarily, well, for two reasons. One, it's one of only 2 schools in the state that doesn't have a uniform, and so there's an implicit trust in that contract.
But we have been threatened with a uniform many times.
They keep threatening them with uniform. Interestingly, the teachers actually have a uniform, but the students don't. That's another story. But the other one was the use of technology in the classrooms. They don't make them hand in their phones at the beginning of the day and that kind of thing. I liked the idea, and Tahlia obviously liked the idea, that they start from a position of trust and then those privileges get removed if you break that trust contract, right? And that was one of the things that really attracted us to the school. Unfortunately, it hasn't really worked out that way. It's more just a case of they use it as threats all the time. They're constantly threatened with, oh, if you don't stick with dress code, then we'll bring in a uniform. And if you don't stop looking at your phone, we'll take your phones away and you'll have to hand them in the office. And the trust contract actually isn't reciprocated on the other side. Tahlia once, she had to leave early. She was feeling ill. And she sent me a text. She says, Mum, can you come pick me up? I'm not feeling well. And I said, sure, I'll be there in 10 minutes. She says, no, make it 20. I have to escape from the high security prison that is my school. Just getting in and out takes several pieces of paper and, at least 15 minutes. So I think trust is actually that central story, and I don't think we're doing it right.
Also, with the technology aspect, we can either use Mac or Windows. We are not allowed to use Chromebook. We're not allowed to use Linux. That we have a long list of things we're not allowed to use. And then I went to the IT support for a completely unrelated reason, and I had LastPass on my laptop, and I was logging into something, and they saw that I had LastPass, and then they basically yelled at me to take it off until I removed the extension from Chrome, and then didn't even help me with the problem because I was too hung up on the fact that I had LastPass.
I think Jenny had a question, and that might be our last one.
Yes.
I'm just curious about, you've obviously grown up in an environment where women in IT are a thing, and you have a very feisty mother who's going to fight for, women's rights and all that kind of thing. And in this environment where I know there are issues sometimes with that, you're obviously going to be feistier and you're going to hear things that your friends might not. Do you feel you grew up, that your response to the gender differences in your school and the way that it's used in the classroom, do you feel that you respond differently because of the environment you've grown up in at home?
I definitely think I do, and compared to most of my friends, it is definitely a very different, just the views in our household are also just quite different. And in my history assignment, I was really motivated to do someone like Gloria Steinem, but then my friend was really hesitant because she knew next to nothing about the feminist movement, and she thought she may be a feminist, and she was like, I don't know, I kind of know nothing about it.
Whereas Tahlia came home and said, I'm doing an assignment on Gloria Steinem, and I laid about half a dozen books off my bookshelf on her.
But I think I definitely have been a bit more motivated when I pointed out the gender divide to one of my friends and started talking about it. She was like, yeah, but how are you going to help it? And I'm like, I was like...
Adults say that too.
I said that we need to at least bring attention. If we can tell people about this gender divide, and I don't fully know where to start, but I thought if I ask other people that I know, other students, and ask them how many girls compared to boys are in their class, and kind of work out it myself, then maybe I can start taking it somewhere. Because I of course don't know if it's parents or if it's what the school is expecting us to do, and maybe, yes, my views against that has caused me to do something different than what other students would do. But I think my views are definitely different because of the way I was brought up.
we might call it a wrap there. Sorry. Come and find us. Unicorn hair.